Okay, we're live. Fantastic. So I'm just going to refresh the screen. Turn that off. How is everybody doing today? I hope well. I'm super excited about this conversation with everybody today. So can you just help me out a bit and let me know that you can hear me clearly via the screen, via the chat? That would be super good. Yes. I know there's a slight delay. No sound. So there should be sound. Can everybody let me know if you can hear me in the hear you good? Okay, fantastic. So people can hear me, which is the sound is a bit low. Let me see if I can move the microphone a bit closer. Does that work? Okay, perfect sound from Hella. Sound is okay. All right, you can hear me. I can hear me. Fantastic. Sorry, my attention is there in the corner because that's where the chat box is on my screen at the moment. Let me move it over to there, so that would help. Okay, fantastic. So what an incredibly intense couple of days it has been with the energy that's taking place right now. And so the first thing that I want to do completely straight away is just let everybody know that this Chiron live stream today and the workshop, that's the 4-video course, this is what this is about. I want to show you what this video course is about, and to kind of share with you what I've done intentionally in this video course. And it's really, really important to know that this whole entire thing came together with an incredibly amount of work from my partner Jen. She has put in a lot of energy to support this creation here today and for this space to actually be available. So I just want to acknowledge that straight away, that this experience, even though I will be sharing it today, it is not just run by myself at all. That she works a lot behind the scenes and is indeed very influential in how and what I've been sharing, or what I'm speaking about today. Okay, so let me just give a bit of a background on what this is about and why I'm doing this apart from the video course. So in my exploration of exploring Chiron over the last couple of years, I've come across different ways of digesting and understanding the material. I've learned about different people's interpretations, and there seems to be a very strong thread of what this archetype means, and so it's not sort of like very unclear. But what I did notice, and I did begin to find very interesting, was that the experiential part of Chiron in most descriptions and most teachings were few and far between. And so what inspired me to bring this together, apart from a few other things like really thinking that Chiron is a very important part of the process when it comes to soul astrology, looking at the soul, understanding the soul, is that the experience of actually doing Chiron work in your chart, in my view, is not something that a lot of people will just jump onto and say, "Oh yeah, let's do some Chiron work." My direct experience, as well as witnessing other people go through transits where Chiron is activated, it's not a type of energy that you just sort of happily go along with. It's very confronting. It's an experience that's incredibly transformative if you can hold it, and it is definitely, in my opinion, like I said, not an energy that you just kind of incarnate into your life and then go, yeah, I'm doing Chiron work. It's from my experience of it, it's not. And so I really wanted to take what I saw as areas in the process of working with Chiron, to create kind of support around it and to suggest how to approach or what type of awareness to have or to cultivate in doing Chiron work, and also to, in a sense, maybe provide or offer some sort of framework, a foundation, a foundational platform, so that when you do or have a transit, or that you are experiencing chironic experiences, that you're able to psychologically and emotionally interact with it from a place that will actually heal you and give you something to meaningful to work with, versus finding yourself being incredibly overwhelmed, and also at the same time just walking away from it actually more wounded than in a sense individuated. Okay, so open up the idea of exploring Chiron in a real way is very much a part of this process. We need to know that Chiron in itself, and the exploration of Chiron in your birth chart and how to interpret it and how to form a relationship to what it means for you psychologically and also practically, are vital components to understanding Chiron. So it's not just enough to know your house placement of Chiron in the sign placement. It's not enough. It's really, really not enough. It doesn't do anything other than kind of give you a vague sense of, okay, yeah, I can identify that in myself. Like there's a lot of limitation in the potential of actually opening up. And a lot of the time, I think that there needs to be, again, like I said, I'm going to really drive this home today. In my view, in my subjective experience, that I want to offer as valuable to those of you that wish to embark on this type of experience, that the authentic way to explore Chiron must have a comprehensive experience and a very sensitive connection to the natal Uranus in your chart, and also to the underlying psychological and emotional dynamics around your Saturn as well. Okay, so you really have to study the family lineage. You have to study your dad and mom in terms of how you internalize them. These are very important components to make this experience truly real. So, like I said, the description of the houses and stuff are important because they give us a sense of how we can begin to identify this energy in a way. But there are a lot of other aspects. I want to kind of cover that today as well. So the key to individuation, all right? Very, very crucial to understand. Chiron is a process in your life that is pointing to an individuation process, a separation from a sense of identity that you have about yourself that is shaped by the collective, but is deeply unique. So individually unique that it is not uncommon to actually realize that through a chironic work that you do have a part of yourself that is going to be very difficult for other people to understand. And very few people will actually understand you in terms of accessing chironic energy in your chart, simply because it being so specific and so highly individual that the energy will attract who needs the medicine, who needs what you are here to offer through healing, through offering medicine to another person. And it can be that abstract, and it can be that deep and profound and complex, that what you are able to offer in that sense can be almost insane to another person if the fractal or the comprehension or the understanding is not on the same wavelength. Okay, so we seek to have knowledge about Chiron, but we need to understand it experientially, and that's where the key is today. Okay. So let me just do this on my screen. I just want to make my screen a little bit bigger over there. Okay. All right, so the first place that I want to take us through, And again, remember that what I'm sharing with you today is an exploration of Chiron. I hope that this journey provides you with something to work with. And it is also showing you what I have within this video course that I've created. Okay, so some of the images that I have in here are from the actual course itself, so you can get a kind of sense of what it is that I'm actually doing in this video course. And when you decide to work with Chiron in your life, you use that video course as the framework to support you during the experience. Okay, so looking at the myth of Chiron and what it suggests to us as a process. Okay, now I am not somebody that has studied mythology, Greek mythology, intensely. I'm very new to the experience. I'm finding certain interest in it quite a lot. I definitely find meaning in how archetypal language can invoke imagery into our consciousness in order for us to interact with and mutate our consciousness. So this is a very kind of condensed sharing of how I understand and interpret the myth of Chiron, or the experience of Chiron, in that sense. Okay, so firstly, the word initial wounding, okay, / birth. So Chiron starts out where Kronos, or Saturn, decides he goes on an adventure to go and search for a character. And on his process, he gets sidetracked and he finds a nymph called Valera. And he, in a sense, chooses to have his way with her. And Chiron is conceived in his sexual interaction with Valera. Now, during their mating, some myths vary, but during their mating, they were both in horse form. So what we have here in this very interesting storyline that I want to highlight here is that there is an initial wounding with Chiron that within our Chiron story. So think Saturn, think Uranus in your chart, and then think of the relationship to what I'm sharing here, right? The wounding around Chiron, there are two of them. There's two layers of it, as far as I understand, as far as I've understood this process. And then I looked at people's charts, and I began to see that this was very clear, actually, that there are two types of woundings that sit with this Chiron. So the initial wounding comes from a place where there is a violation of boundaries that you carry with inside of yourself in the way that in the way that the world interacts with you. So it's almost like the wounding firstly comes from a kind of rape or violation of boundaries. Now, it's not a Plutonian disempowerment rape where it's like a complete annihilation. It's more like a choicelessness in the experience that then births the Chiron. So Chiron gets born, and his mother, Valera, immediately observes Chiron in half man, half centaur form, or he's a centaur, and she rejects him immediately. She is disgusted by his form. She's disgusted by what she has actually created or birthed, and so she immediately rejects him. So there is what this suggests, from what I've experienced and working with clients and seeing it, is that the first sort of wounding that we carry around our Chiron in our chart, and this I think would be pertaining to Saturn, the Saturn part of us, okay, the Saturn archetype, is a kind of structural nature of our lives, our ego structure, in which there is an immediate rejection, or a rejection of our own self, and a wounding where we don't know how to give power to that self because we are so young. So I came across Tom Jacobs' work quite a while ago, and he's done some really good work on Chiron. And he spoke about, he kind of illustrated it this way, where he talked about that the first 3 months of your life, you'll actually develop this wounding because when you're actually trying to communicate to your parents about a specific need that you have, it's unavailable, right? So what would happen is that there would be a behavior in your environment from your parents or in the environment itself that would be different to what is essential for you for your individuality. And so in that process, there is like a rejection or a forgetting of your own personal individuation or individuality. Okay, and it's kind of develops as a sensitivity in your field, in your awareness that is unique to you, that in a sense cannot be felt or understood by another, right? So the experience of your own physical vehicle not able to actually interact with the environment in a way where your own boundaries can be established, and then the rejection or the forgetting of this like innate individual process that is important for you. So it suggests this initial wounding around Saturn of, and it's very clear when you start to probe the Saturn in the chart. You'll find out that it plays out profoundly. So, like I said over here, Valera, upon seeing her newborn son Chiron, obviously a centaur, is so disgusted and appalled that she rejects and abandons her child. So there's abandonment that is innately within the Saturn archetype in your chart, and there's also an innate sense of rejection of your individuality in that way. So this is kind of the wounding of it, and we actually have to explore those complexes in ourselves. And that's why I said that before you could identify these complexes in yourself, any Chiron work that you're doing, it can be spontaneous and it can have certain experiences that are there. But really, if we're not looking at what is wounded or rejected within us, we're never actually going to move past those layers of emotional stuckness or frozenness. So Chiron's foster parent, Apollo, right, as you can see over here, god of music, prophecy, poetry, and healing, taught Chiron all he knew. And as a result, Chiron later in his life became a powerful mentor to the sons and kings of many of the most famous Greek heroes. And this is very important to understand in the process, is that there is an element to your Chiron in your chart where the process from the initial rejection and the initial wounding of your own personal sovereignty or your own personal boundaries not being fully formed in the way that is correct for you leads to a deep inner searching. Okay, and what is interesting here, and I was doing some research on a person that really emphasized this in his blog about Chiron being a teacher. And that oftentimes that when we find ourselves navigating through life and needing to apply a specific type of knowledge or a specific type of education to, or an understanding to solve the riddle that is in front of us, Chiron can actually be there to whisper into your ear, if you're listening, certain suggestions or behavior patterns or thinking or a skill that you have to pick up. So what I actually learned during my own personal Chiron work for this and preparation for this, because obviously I had to incarnate it into my own life to deal with, was that you have to pick up a new skill to add to, or, and it's not necessarily you have to or it's demanded or if that's how you do it. It's not about that. It's more that part of the process of healing and coming to terms with the mastery of Chiron in your chart is actually realizing that there is a skill set or knowledge or something new that you can actually educate and learn about your process that brings you to a place of being a teacher in that area. It's almost like being an authoritarian in that field. And again, the difference between an oppressive authoritarian is these are the rules versus somebody that educates or supports or suggests through wisdom gained, that being the key here. So we're taught through life by Chiron as well, where it suggests to us, and if we're listening very carefully, we can hear a kind of whisper that says this way, or that's the process, or and it'll always be around the theme, the house placement of Chiron, and of course the the sign. And that's where house sign sort of descriptions can be supportive, because you can identify the archetype in your life. Okay. So the second wounding, right? As Chiron's kind of living out his life, and he's immortal, so he can't die. Chiron one day is hit or struck by an arrow. Okay. And there's very variations to, how this happened, where it, but he's hit by, or accidentally, by the way, the keyword here is accidentally hit by an arrow with poison in it. Okay. And so this process, let me just, this process of the second wounding within our Chiron story, and our wounding of Chiron, suggests to us that we also live in a world in which there are going to be accidents that are going to take place. We're interfacing with the world itself and with experiences itself, and there are going to be certain things that are going to come out of nowhere, and they're going to impact you. And what this kind of suggests on one level is that the wounding that exists within Chiron, and this is very physical, this is the physicalness of the wounding that sits in Chiron over here. And this, again, Chiron is very deeply associated with ancestral karma as well. So the experience of understanding the wounding in your birth chart does not necessarily have to be in this lifetime where it originated from. And that in itself already shows you what you're dealing with here when you're trying to explore your Chiron. Because if you're thinking to yourself, oh, okay, I'm going to try and identify it right now in this moment, but I'm trying to understand the origins of it, then it can become very limiting in being able to access a deeper process of healing the nature of Chiron story in your chart, right? So coming back to the second wounding part, and Chiron is hit by this poisonous arrow. Now he's immortal, and he cannot bear the pain of this poison arrow, okay, the blood of the Hydra. And so he's, in a sense, suffering a great deal. All right. So Chiron was immortal and he could not die, but the poison called him unbearable pain to him. Okay, so he had to find a way to kind of fix this situation for himself. He needed to. So come along Prometheus, and very, very broad stroke process over here. Prometheus represents to us this the archetype of Aquarius or Uranus in the birth chart. Okay, Prometheus was chained to a rock in different ways, in different variations of the story, but essentially we're talking about something that is caught, sorry, not caught, but trapped in a like a cell. Okay, so he's chained to a rock by Zeus. For defying Zeus, he essentially stole fire and gave it to humanity. And here you see this beautiful illustration of the Aquarius archetype and the polarity of Aquarius being the sun. So Leo and Aquarius are in opposition to each other, and we talk about the fire, the essence of creativity. And fire creates in that way. It allows things to burn. So when we're talking about Prometheus over here, we're talking about the Uranian aspect. And again, this is my relationship to the story and how it relates to the archetype of Uranus in your birth chart, and what it means to begin exploring Chiron in a deeper way. So what this suggests to us is that Prometheus is chained to the rock. So there's a sense of limitation of your individuality in the world that you live within, right? There's a restriction. And because of your individuality, a lot of the time we can be rejected by consensus. We can be judged or criticized for being different, and we kind of, the shame that we can potentially carry. So we're kind of chained to this thing of wanting to bring fire and meaning and creativity to our lives, and yet shutting it down for and holding it back, as it were, for being punished or chained to a consensus way of thinking, or this is the rules and you shouldn't be outside the rules, as an example. Don't challenge it. Now, another part of the story is that Prometheus's liver gets eaten every single day by a crow in this case, and his liver grows back every day. So he's constantly being under excruciating pain of having his liver eaten out of him every single day. So the crow comes, eats it out, and then the sun goes down, comes up, it regenerates, and the crow comes out there. And there's a beautiful suggestion here in this process where our life force regenerates and we return to a state of, I can't neglect or repress my individuality for all. But every time I do that, I'm always reminded of the repressed emotional individuation process in me. And every day as it regenerates and I feel like I can express myself this way, or I can acknowledge my individuality, or I can own it, there is that part that always reminds us of, oh, no, maybe I shouldn't, um, almost like the super ego from Freud's perspective of the shoulds and shouldn'ts and the judgments of maybe I shouldn't do that. And it's very profound because when you begin to like sense that type of dialogue that you have within yourself, and this is where I get very inspired to drive home my point about Chiron in the in this being an experiential. It's very exclusive to you. You honestly cannot have somebody like truly tell you this is what your Chiron means. You honestly do have to explore your own subconscious and the nature of your own individuation process to authentically know it. We as astrologers can point to a place, and this is what this is also about, this live stream, and also the full video course. It's specifically done to say, here's a bunch of tools, go and explore it. And in your exploration, here are things that I've researched and found to be supportive when you meet things that you will come across in your exploration of Chiron in your chart. Because it can, like I said, it's incredibly confronting. You have to be really real with yourself to truly get this work to be transformative, in my opinion, at least. So coming back to this process here, this Prometheus being chained and his liver being taken out every single day as it regenerates speaks to a kind of psychological pattern that you could have inherited from your mother, that she inherited from her grandmother, because she failed to transform her Chiron in her chart. And so ancestrally, we pass on the Chiron story to the next person until eventually somebody picks up the baton and says, okay, I'm ready to transform it. But up until that point in time, it will be an unconscious pattern that will just be passed down to generations until eventually, like I said, somebody says, I'll cut it off here. So Chiron comes along, he realizes, he talks to Zeus, he makes a deal with Zeus, and he says, okay, Zeus says, okay, well, I'll exchange my immortality. So Chiron, I'll exchange my immortality for the freedom of Prometheus. And so what it speaks to here is that he surrenders his life force to live on forever as a sacrifice, okay? And he shoots the crow through the heart. And man, is there an incredibly profound teaching in that process, just that action of the arrow shooting the crow, or this bird, straight through the heart. Okay. It suggests to us that the process of liberation within our Chironic story is that the truth that we seek to liberate ourselves from our own suffering has to go through the heart. It's straight through the heart. It's not a spiritual bypass. It feels like it is hit the sensitive point of what gives life to the suffering, and it breaks it open. And it says, no longer will I want to give life force to something that keeps me separate from my wholeness or my empowerment or the patterns that I believe to be true, because I'm afraid of confronting what exists beneath my psychological barriers of protection. So Chiron shoots the crow through the heart, this bird through the heart. Prometheus is released from this process, and of course Chiron dies. Prometheus is there, sorry, Chiron is then sort of hailed as incredibly, brave for this process of deep sacrifice for himself, and he gets placed into the constellation Sagittarius with the centaurs, and he is relieved from this pain. So the second wounding within ourselves is the liberation from our repressed individuality. And the repressed individuality is breaking down the barriers or defense mechanisms that we hold in place that protect us from vulnerability or from death, i.e., transmutation. So here we have, it's the 19th of April 2019, and we have the Easter weekend experience. And in the Bible, it talks about the process of Jesus dying on the cross and then resurrection and so on. And what I find really fascinating about the process of Chiron is that it is a descent into the unknown through a sacrifice of your own conditioning. It is bearing the cross of your own mortality, and then, in a sense, dying to the ego, as in the ego dissolves or descends into an alignment with soul awareness, and then what arises in that process is liberation. Okay, so like I said, the immortality comes here. So the second wounding is the ability to regain your individuality and what comes through that process. Okay, all right, so a healer is not somebody you go to for healing. A healer is someone who helps you to find the key within you for your own ability to heal. So we see here that that healing has two main roads. Okay? We see something that we don't like, so we reject it. Wow, that's not nice. I don't want to go down that emotional road. Rejection, abandonment in that process. We learn through that wound or that rejection that we cannot heal ourselves in this process, because the path to healing means confronting it. And it means going straight through the heart, and then through that process of finding individuality, through there you find the medicine, and your own unique process becomes the resonance, i.e. that the alchemical transmutation process that exists within you when you come out the other side of your journey. This is why Chiron will be deeply associated with a kind of shamanic experience, because it is an inner vision quest that leads you to opening up doors to your own psychological and psyche that nobody else can actually do, because it's not their story. So when you come out the other side, there is a specific resonance, energetic field that you carry within you that is vibratory. And it is not studied. It is a state of being, of an awareness that then attracts the people that are able to digest the medicine that it is that you contain within yourself. Okay? So it is very unique, and it is very selective in that process as well. And that is also something that's very beautiful to understand about the contemplation and the reflection of your own Chiron in your story. So you have to really become, in a sense, your own archaeological, like you need to go into your own process of digging up what is repressed, bringing it to the surface, releasing it, and then through that experiencing experience the suffering, and then the compassion that arises out of that, the empathy that naturally arises out of that, that's authentic, because you can feel the pain in the other. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to pause there for a second, because that was an incredible amount to digest and take in. I encourage you to take as much time as possible to really, take this in, and slowly and rewatch the video over and over in that sense. Okay. Okay. So a little bit about Chiron's nodes. I felt that this was really important, by the way. One of my friends that deeply supports my own personal investigations of stuff, Cameron, he really sort of like suggested to me, what does Chiron's nodes look like, and what it's about. And so that spun me off into a whole deep investigation, and what I found was just incredible. I speak a little bit about that in the full moon in Libra that is done today as well. So if you want to go learn a little bit more about what that means, because we've actually had those, we actually have the full moon in Libra landing on Chiron's nodes. So here you have a chart, and as you can see, I've got two little circles. So Chiron's nodes and the incarnation. So I go deep into what this symbolizes in the video course for a very specific reason as well. And so I want to share a little bit with you today. Every single planet within the solar system has a nodal trajectory. Okay, so in astrology, you have your south node of your moon, you have your north node of the moon. Well, every planet has the same trajectory. And what it suggests to us is that there is a line of evolutionary development that archetype is on for the collective. And to understand that, you have to be able to begin digesting that Earth is a field of energy that supports the awakening in the material form. And so these symbolic planetary archetypes represent paths or directions or lines of traveling that your consciousness will be attuned to, that reflects an awakening process. So Chiron's incarnation and its nodal axis sits here. So the south node of Chiron, and this is the geocentric nodes, by the way, not heliocentric. They actually are a little bit different with heliocentric. These are geocentric nodes. And so Chiron's south node fluctuates between 26 degrees Aries and 6 degrees Taurus. Okay? And you've got to think that if you have planets in these areas, you will, on some way, shape, or form, be very sensitive to the trajectory that Chiron has for the collective and what it symbolizes to you in your birth chart. So you can take your birth chart, look where between 26 degrees and 6 degrees Aries and Taurus, and whatever houses those sit in will point to the very subtle stream of evolutionary intention that Chiron wants to take you on in your birth chart. Okay, so I know that mine sits in my third and fourth house, and it's not a coincidence that in my third and fourth house, actually Chiron, my third and fourth house, and then at the top of my chart, I actually have, which is over here, so Chiron's north node, right, 26 degrees Libra, 6 degrees Scorpio. So I have Saturn at 6 degrees Scorpio. I have my sun sign at 2 degrees Scorpio, which is where the moon is today. I'm doing this actual presentation on this this place. I have my Pluto and my Mercury at 29 degrees Libra. And then my midheaven is at 25 degrees Libra. So you can see that there's an immediate correlation between something that I feel very sensitive to when I pick up the story of Chiron and what it represents to me in my own personal birth chart. And this symbolism in my birth chart and the evolutionary trajectory of what Chiron represents to us it's just profound when I awaken it in myself. What does that represent and suggest? Chiron's nodal axis in this area. Well, it's firstly the Aries Libra dynamic can speak to where humanity overall is learning to heal through human interaction and human interrelatability. So one of the ways that this can show up within our consciousness is how we actually are learning to draw boundaries between our sense of self, I, Aries, and other people's boundaries and their sense of individuation, and how we kind of learn to interact with each other, how we can feel, how we can begin to learn to share and understand and include each other. And then when we are also learning which types of people benefit us and which type of people do not, as a path of learning to become emotionally understood as we interrelate with other people. So another example that we can use to illustrate this very carefully is that if you think of your interpersonal relationships between your mom, your dad, your siblings, if you have any, your relationships, you'll notice that those are the areas where your deepest growth tends to take place, especially when you're learning about yourself, South Node in Aries. And you will also notice as well is that on the path of healthy relationship interaction, as in learning how to interrelate with each other through recognizing what common values or ethics you have or moral code you have, how you perceive reality versus another person's, and how that trajectory and your trajectory are different or work. So when you're interacting with another person, you're learning about how to interact with others in this very intimate family complex or dynamic. You're also very aware that with the mother archetype or the father archetype in your life, whether it be present or absent, it reveals a lot about your own personal story. It's in those areas where we will be confronted very deeply about ourselves. And that's where I see the Taurus Scorpio part of it, is that there's also an element of Chiron that speaks to a bridge between our immediate self and the exterior world or existential world, but the interplay between somebody else's inner universe and your own. And then how the transformation, Scorpio, leads or gets to come to that point through confrontation. So the North Node in Scorpio suggests confrontation or intimacy. So intimacy not seen as sexual intimacy, but intimacy seen as two people being vulnerable with their own limitations, and then through the exploration of those limitations leading to deeper self-understanding. And then through that deeper self-understanding, providing deeper value and enrichment to the experience of human interaction. Okay? So this is what I see and feel into when I see the nodes of Chiron and what suggests for us in terms of transmutation here. Okay? And it's very profound in that sense. It's very profound. Not even to go into the fact that South Node of Uranus squares the nodes in Sagittarius, Gemini. It speaks about how we interface with our belief systems and the overall cosmologies and so on and so forth. So yeah. Okay. So Chiron's orbit and symbolic meaning, right? That's Chiron symbol in that sense over there. Let me just get the little laser point for everybody to see. Let me know if you can see it. Let me do this. Okay, hold on. Okay, cool, you can see it. So, there's the key again. This suggests to us an awakening of higher spiritual ideals, and the struggle, not necessarily negative struggle, because it's not that. It's more about the fusing of our Saturn limitations and the more animal sense of limitation that we carry with ourselves, our urges, something that's rooted more in the material process versus the sort of bow and arrow from the Sagittarius sense that suggests a kind of exploration of consciousness that opens us up to beyond our own personal limitations. So this key, on one hand, like I said, is a key to individuation. Okay, and this is the orbit of Saturn, Uranus, and Chiron, by the way. So let me go ahead and actually show you over here. Let me do this first. So firstly, can you see the word Saturn over here? And then I've written perihelion, and here we've got Uranus and aphelion. So when Chiron is at what is called in astrological and astronomy terms aphelion, it's saying that Chiron is closest to Uranus's orbit and it is furthest away from the sun. So aphelion speaks to where something is furthest away from the sun in terms of its orbit, because Chiron has a very ecliptic and eccentric orb, like as in terms of its orbit. Sorry, right? It is going to oscillate between Uranus's orbit, which sits in the black over there, and Saturn's orbit, which is white over here. So when Chiron is moving closer to the orbit of Saturn, it will be closer to the sun, because Saturn is closer to the sun than Uranus. And you'd be incredibly surprised at how that impacts us when Chiron is at its aphelion and when it is at its perihelion. And I go deeper into that in terms of the video course on how to represent that in your own life. But at the moment, Chiron is closer to the aphelion, which is to Uranus. And you can see right now on the planet, there's an incredible sense of Uranian energy that's present with us. And oh, thank you very much for forwarding that across. I appreciate that. Sorry, guys. I realized that my camera is actually blocking it. So let me just remove that. Thanks very much. I appreciate that. I didn't actually see that. Okay, so let me just come back. Here's the actual image itself. You can see it. There's Chiron. There's the red. That's Chiron's orbit. And I actually have an animation that I'm going to play for you guys. So there we go. So Chiron goes around like so. Let's see if I can do it again for everybody. That's Chiron's orbit. So from Uranus all the way to Saturn, and then comes back to Uranus again. Okay. So again, perihelion closest to Saturn, aphelion closest to Uranus, and it reflects to us this archetype of Saturn and Uranus, and Chiron being in Barbara Hand Clow's book, The Rainbow Bridge. Well, we're talking about the process from moving from a Saturn dynamic to a Uranus dynamic. Okay. So in our myth, Prometheus, Saturn, Chiron is interfacing with the Uranian field. This is where we are breaking from our illusions and our duality and our suffering. And in the Saturnian realm, this is where we're talking about the initial wounding of rejection. Okay. All right. Okay, so again, Saturn representing this, and Uranus representing that, right? The liberation and the fusing of the two. Okay. So Saturn and the ego. And let me just put my video back there again. Okay. So this is a really important thing to begin understanding about working with Saturn in your chart. So Saturn ego structure. Okay. Actually, I'll just bring it over here first, and I'll say the reason why we're looking at Saturn in our birth charts, as I emphasized earlier on, was that it speaks to where we are innately going to reject what is going to be the rejection of our individuality, and what are the conditions surrounding it, and how does that rejection take place, and what sort of defense mechanisms has the psyche put in place that will prevent you from exploring a deeper process within yourself, because the defense mechanism, in a sense, is actually put in place to hold something safe. Okay, so the nature of the rejection itself is very primordial. It's very, when you're in your infancy stage, and so a lot of the time when you're actually learning about understanding your defense mechanisms, you have to really see this as more of body processing. So pre-verbal responses within yourself. I know that when I was growing up, so there's a question, sorry, just in the chat where it says, when you talk about the initial wound, is this even womb related? Yes, that is correct. This can be something that will stem from an ancestral lineage that will come into the lifetime, and it can be definitely manifested in the womb. Absolutely. In fact, when you listen to which I'll get into over here, which is part of your Chiron work, Stanley Groff's work, when he talks about the prenatal stages of your energy incarnating, and that, and also speaking to Melanie Reinhardt's work, where she was pointing out that look at your Chiron transit before your return, because you'll actually have the first 9 months before your actual Chiron return will reveal a lot about what was actually occurring in the womb. It's very confronting as well, and it speaks to how you can carry ancestral karma with yourself. And I've literally seen that not only in myself but also in other people, where that's just been so apparent, and you carry that story with you throughout your whole life, and it it influences and shapes you in a way that you don't even realize. Sometimes it can be that profound. So anyway, so we're looking at Saturn and the ego here, and we're talking about this boundary. It's how you perceive yourself in the most physical world, the shaping of your most immediate environment. And so this is something that you can relate to. Okay. Now, this is really, really cool. I love this so much. Why do we have defenses? Why we have these defenses? Okay. And I love this image so much. It spoke to me so much because it illustrates the kind of experience that exists between the Saturn realm, which is very much this castle over here. You can see it. It's very fortified. It's there in protection. The experience is constructed because of a fear. It is established as this is my place. It's very defensive. And so these are the triggers. These are the defense mechanisms that we have in place, and they're very subtle. A lot of the time, the actual breaking down of these defense mechanisms within ourselves, you have to go through a lot of fear, because it's in that fear that is where the trench of the wall comes up in order for protection to exist. And you don't play with these. You don't play with the defense mechanisms like, oh, okay, I'm just going to go explore this, because once you start to deconstruct certain defense mechanisms, you have to be prepared for what was going to arise out of what has essentially been repressed. And that sometimes can be very overwhelming. So this is not to be taken lightly. Okay. So when we protect ourselves, so we won't feel pain, that protection becomes like armor that imprisons the softness of the heart. So this is Pima Trojan, and she, can you see the myth of Chiron in this process, right? You can see the Saturn dynamic within here. It's protection from the pain. So we're in a constant state of suffering when we're protecting ourselves from the pain, because the defense or the armoring that we put on it is to protect ourselves from an existential threat that is invoking that pain. Just like with the body and this, and if you cut yourself, I was actually thinking about it today, where my daughter just recently fell on some concrete, and she got herself, like some scratches on her knees. And we've all been there, we've all fell or fallen, and we've scratched ourselves. And sometimes, especially on the knees, it can be really, really uncomfortable. And I was thinking to myself that I was saying to her today that, can you see how your body or your skin has actually created its natural plasters? That's a quote from Jen, by the way, like your body has natural plasters, which is completely true. And so anyway, I was saying to her, can you see how your body's sort of protecting you over there, and the skin is protecting us? And in that moment, I had this flash of teaching of Chiron, where it showed me that when we do get a wound, or when we are wounded, i.e. the second wound, through an event that comes from out of nowhere, and we're hurt, like in her case, she fell, her skin got opened, and now she's got these wounds here. It's painful. She wants to get rid of it. And initially, when we have a wound, the psychology of that wound represents soreness, sensitivity, and I don't like that. And then what the body does is, Saturn, the skin, is it by nature just creates a protection layer over it that says, okay, I'll protect you. And this is kind of the natural teaching of Saturn. So we develop these protection mechanisms around our pain, and they essentially stay there until you actually begin to explore it. And so when you explore it, you're doing what she's suggesting here, which is that we imprison the softness of the heart, which is the liberation that comes, and the sacrifice that comes from going into the pain, and then through the pain teaching us compassion, empathy, and an emotional kind of relatability to other people's story, and this kind of then linking up the nodes of Chiron. Okay. All right. So just to kind of conceptualize in certain ways, because one of the things that can be very difficult about beginning to process the Chiron work is also that when you're going into Saturn, Uranus, and Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune realms, you're dealing with invisible from the perspective of Saturn. That is why the majority of people within the world will not find value in astrology, because astrology is not speaking to a part of ourselves that is physical, as in that glass is physical, science can objectify it. The essence of astrology and the symbolic nature of the astrology speaks to a deeply intuitive feminine process. And yet at the same time, you can actually use the astrology archetypes to validate it in the natural world, because Saturn itself will speak to the skin of the body, right? The protection mechanism. So when we begin to explore this inner dimensional state of being within ourselves, you've got to see that there are fields of awareness that are very subtle, and so that defense mechanism, Saturn, will protect us from this invisible, these more subtle energies, because it does require a certain level of sensitivity to embrace and integrate and take in these energies into ourselves, and they require a very concentrative way of being. It's a very internal process. Again, why I said that nobody can really do your Chiron for you, because they don't have the sensitivity to the unique energetic field that's around you and what is held within that energetic field. So it has to be you. Yeah. So this picture is brilliant for me, because I think it really begins to help us conceptualize these things. Okay. Okay, so the primordial essence is this blackness over here. It's non-dual. It is everything and nothing is nothing. It is completely one with itself. There is no separation within the primordial oneness. This can be seen as Neptune. Okay. And it's, in this case, it's all encompassing. And when we start to bring our attention and our awareness closer to the physical realm of Saturn, we go through the barrier of the invisible Uranian field, okay, which is held with this imagery over here. So this unique Uranian field, that's your own. And so the field of unifying is a reflection of self-understanding. So Uranus and Saturn interplay, and Chiron shows us how we can actually feel the nature of our own vortex. So Chiron is revealing to us the ability to become sensitive to what that individual vortex is about. Okay? So we're learning to understand the framework for how Saturn interfaces with everything else. Okay? And in this case, Saturn is the form. Okay? It's the physical form. So you see how we've gone into closer into dimensions. So we've gone from the totality that is incredibly infinite in its state, and then as we kind of come closer to ourselves, we feel how we interface with that primordial essence that's unique to ourselves, and then we're right in the most dense form over here, and we can feel the density. And so these energy fields are interfacing with us. And Chiron points to the ability to understand how this form interfaces with this form. So what we're looking at here when we're understanding your Chiron is what do you carry in your energetic field? How is that ancestrally defined as well? So again, to give us a very subtle example, because it is very subtle, not all the time, but it definitely can be, because we'll also carry a very physical wound with Saturn, with Chiron as well. The second wound where Chiron is hit by the arrow, the poison arrow, we can carry a physical wound with us that is, we can't heal it. And it's in that process of not being able to heal, do we find the compassion to in a sense, sacrifice our physical life, as in our life means that we carry that wound with us, and as we carry it with us, it permeates compassion and the capacity to feel and soften the armoring in other people. So in this place over here, it is the interface of this invisible field and the subtlety of it. And so I know in my ancestral karma, there's a very, and for most of us, so it's not something that's, unique to me, but it's definitely very highlighted within myself, is this kind of shame complex that exists. And when I explored Chiron through me, and then I had to go and understand the cellular DNA that was passed on to me from my mother, I had to actually work out the cellular memory in myself that is my mother's. That's how deep Chiron goes here. You actually have to work out the cellular memory in your own field, and literally iron it out from your mother's DNA, so that you can then begin to break the patterns within yourself, so that you can liberate yourself from this kind of ancestral story or lineage material that can come with you. And so it exists within this field. And so sensitive to shame, as an example, right, is something that when I explored, I realized that the pattern didn't start with me, but that was passed down to me. And so breaking that within inside of myself, but being very sensitive to it, has become a very deep part of what type of medicine my Chiron is asking. Okay. So the circle is non-dual until the boundary is established. And this is the primordial essence. The circle is the space. It is nothing. It's non-dual. And then when we put Saturn into it, we establish the boundary, and then consciousness can reflect on itself. But in the state of primordialness, there isn't anything to reflect on until the boundary is created. And so that's why the form of Saturn must be held in place in order to, in a sense, materialize the wound that is existing in the ether. Okay. All right. So wounding from our division. Okay. The words of Alexandra, and I can't actually pronounce the person's surname. Right. That the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart. Okay. Of every human being. It is in the utmost importance that we strive to recognize our shadow qualities and integrate them into our conscious awareness. So I chose this picture specifically because this is very much the wounding of Saturn and the division and the separation that exists. And because, of course, Chiron's sort of trajectory is on this Libra-Aries axis, it's very much about the division in human race. I'm white, you're black, you are Asian, I am Jamaican. It's all of these definitions that divide us, and yet the essence of our incarnation all comes from the same place, and we've forgotten about that. And that is very much about the patriarchy in the sense of creating division through just the division. The Saturn creates duality in that sense. And so when we are divided in that sense, we are separated from our primordialness, and in that state we are naturally materializing defense mechanisms. So the wounding from our cultural truths and belief systems, and how we come to see ourselves in our own suffering. And grief is already a big part of this process. I encourage you to understand that when you actually do Chiron work, grief is a very, very important process of resolving where those repressed experiences were taking place for you. Because the grief you could carry could be from ancestral timelines, and you just feel that energy in you, but you can't seem to really pinpoint it. It requires a vision quest in that sense. It's something to just sit and kind of just be with for a moment and feel the nature of sadness that exists within the collective at the moment around the division. It's anger that shows up. It's judgment, and it's persecution, and it's blaming, and it's you're not as good as me, or you caused this, etc. And that line is very, very apparent within us at the moment. And so again, Chiron's North Node suggests to us the healing process there. So we first have to go through those more repressed parts of ourselves. Okay. So Thanks very much for spending this time with me today. In the sense, I know that it's a lot to take in. So, of course, okay. So Uranus and individuation. Here we look at exploring Uranus in a completely different way, and I want to kind of change the role that Uranus represents to us. So Uranus is always seen as the troublemaker, right? It's always seen as the process of, he's radical, it's the transformative, but the troublemaker. And I think that there's something very important to kind of break away from the definition of the idea of Uranus being the troublemaker, for two reasons. One, I think it's highly misunderstood, and two, it prevents us from seeing the magic that is inherently within the universe itself. Uranus's energy works in a nonlinear way. So Uranus is nonlinear, so the timelines offer a completely different approach to the nature of its process. So what we'll work with understanding about Uranus in the chart for us is that when experiences occur that in the moment are deeply off range or seem radical or offbeat or different in that sense, is actually just the image of the nature of the cosmos working at a level that's beyond Saturn. So it's quantum in that sense. It's interacting with different timelines in different ways, and so things are crossing. There is no, fractals are very unique and different, and there is non-linear to it. So your soul can choose to incarnate during this time to resolve certain complexes in its history, and the transits that are taking place at the age of 29 or 30 or 51 or Uranus opposition are the exact transits that needed to awaken memory that can exist that occurred 3 lifetimes ago. That's the depth of what we're dealing with here with Uranus in that sense. It's pointing to the nature and the fabric of the universe as it is. And it is not linear. And so when we try to think of experiences in our lives, like for instance, when we go through a Chiron return, we'll think, okay, oh my God, I'm going through this right now. But if you're not embracing the fact that this could be a storyline that is being healed in a different dimension or in a different timeline or in a different space, then firstly, you're neglecting or denying the fact that the nature of the universe operates in a different way than what your mind's comfortable with. And secondly, it is a call from Uranus to show you that because of the idea of quantum energy being the way that it is, that the Uranian energy in this lifetime is pointing to a resolution here that will support not only the changing of patterns going forward, but also ancestral memory of when certain experiences would have happened in which the origin of, say, said shame was taking place. Okay? So Uranus has got this very non-linearness to it. And so because of that, the troublemaker archetype is more of an inconvenience than it is actually something else. So as the journey unfolds, in our process of Chiron, we come to an edge. And we approach the edge of Saturn, where we find ourselves at what is called a threshold of deeper depth. So this is the kind of work of Carl Jung, for instance, in his exploration of his own consciousness and his own psyche. And this is just one person as an example. You can look at Freud as an example, going into the psyche, not looking at his ideals and stuff, but really exploring what's beneath the surface. A depth psychology, psychosynthesis, exploring, which I talk about later on, things like holotropic breath work, the work of Stanley Groff, where he's talking about exploring the psyche in different ways. But when we do actually reach a point to explore our Chiron, there is a threshold that we meet, and this is the defense mechanism or the protection layer that exists within us. So we approach this threshold of our deeper depth, the deeper unconscious, the ocean. And this is kind of the gateway to the unconscious, right? Uranus is the gatekeeper. And it's a place where we can begin to know our inner self that has, firstly, non-linearness to it, and secondly, doesn't have a definition in the way that our minds perceive it. So immediately it suggests to us that we're exploring something beyond what is going to be comfortable to the mind and also understood by it. It has to become experiential. It's a resonance that cannot be described in that sense. So the healing story in an individual in this process is individual, and it leads us to find our own process. It suggests to us that when we reach this threshold, when we reach this place of comfortability and security, there is a guardian that sits there at the gate. And it's actually quite cool, because when I was looking deeper into this work and coming across this understanding, there was a person that was writing that if you ever explore like plant medicine as an example, or work with shamanic healing, there is always a kind of pre-practice / preparation time that you need to go through in order for you to go beyond what is known to the eye. And one of the major reasons why that is the case is because there is a psychological and emotional and attitude and kind of like mental attitude that you have to take, that you got to begin to see symbolically, because now you're interfacing with the primordial essence of nature as it is symbolically. A snake moving across like that suggests this, and you explore that. That's why I said right in the beginning, it points to a level of insanity to certain people when you try to describe the experience, because it's very, very, it's deeply symbolic. So I can't remember which Star Wars film it in, either 1 or 2. I think it's 2. Luke Skywalker has to go to the Dogon Cave where he meets Yoda for the first time. And it illustrates this so beautifully. He has to go into this cave, and Yoda says to him, well, I'm just kind of like going to recreate the story over here, because I don't know the actual language itself. It's lost a long time that I'd explored it, but it was very apparent to me. Luke, it's dark, it's uncomfortable, and it suggests exploration of our own psychological nature. It's going underneath, it's exploring our shadow, it's going deep within us. It's unknown, it's the depth, it's black, we don't know what it is. And he says, is there anything dangerous in there? Okay, Luke says this, and Yoda turns around and says to him, the only thing that's dangerous there is what you take with you. Okay. And of course, the story of Luke is that he's trying to understand this nature of his dad. Anyway, he goes into it, and what it suggests to us is when we go into the depth, what we will find is our own fears and our own defense mechanisms and our own like protection layers. And so the guardians of this threshold represent a attitude that you have to take when you go into the realm of Saturn. And the first thing that it suggests is letting go of an attachment to an idea or an experience or a perception that you hold about yourself. Because when you don't let go of that attachment, when you don't let go of what you're holding onto, you bring it into the subconscious, and it comes up to you. So you can't liberate. So this is what we're talking about, Joe, with the truth in this threshold, is that when we need to uncover a belief pattern or a sort of like psychological disposition we have to something, we have to first recognize that we hold it within ourselves, so that when we actually go into this threshold, the guardians are saying, I will let you in if you are prepared to let something of yourself go. If you are ready to surrender something, a belief about yourself that will prevent you from seeing the truth. You know, if you just sit with that for a moment and ask yourself the question, if that's not confronting, then I don't know what is. Because it really, really, really points to a level of honesty about your experience that is, it's not taught in schools. It's sort of provided to you through hopefully a grandparent or a parent that might hold that ideal inside of themselves, but it's not a common thing. You don't see an advert on TV suggesting to you that this is an empowering way of being. It's not an ethical kind of value system that is integrated within our culture. And again, this is what I'm talking about in in this teaching over here when I say that this exploration of Chiron is, like Pima Chodron talks about in another quote where she says, go to places that scare you. As a process of Chiron, it's very confrontational, and it's not a, oh, okay, now I know my Chiron, I've read this over here, let's explore it. It is actually doing this very thing where we have to meet those, I'm interfacing with this person and I'm getting triggered, and I need to explore that trigger. I need to explore the resistance in me. And then when we come to explore and open up that resistance, we actually find a deeper truth in there that was being revealed to us through the interaction of being triggered by another person. So it's really the place of honesty and a level that is deeply healing, and it shoots the arrow straight through the heart. Okay. So it's like I said, it's a protection mechanism from traumas. Sometimes the trauma is way too big. I know that over the last, I don't know, maybe you have also, but over the last like 5 days, my dreams have been really intense, and there have been certain times where I've actually explored, where I've been experiencing my dream, and then I would reach a point where I'd wake up suddenly like this, and I would feel that I've hit a trauma in my psyche because it woke me up straight away. It woke me up straight away. It wasn't, and I could feel it. I could feel that there was a band of energy that was saying, that is no-go zone. Whatever existing in over there requires a little bit more discipline to be able to access, because it's not just playground stuff. I could feel it straight away. And so there's also traumas that are held within the psyche that are specifically protected for a reason, that requires a very strong discipline of going into those places to explore. So sometimes it's actually better to just, wait until you have enough space in your life to actually process the fact that if you do explore that trauma, you probably will collapse or have to break down completely in order for you to be reeled back up again. Okay. So we find ourselves at the threshold of our deeper truth. I just want to quickly run through these things over here. So this is how I see a natal chart, actually, to be honest. When I look at your natal charts, I see the points over there. And when I see like Saturn at 7 years old, you tell me a story, and that story tells me a sort of conditioning field that's held within your DNA structure. And this is the kind of process, the DNA genetic mutation of how you unfold your life, So he has 7 years, part of me is 7 years old, and unfortunately you watch, your parents split up and you move home and you lose best friends. You get to the age of, say, 33, and Saturn hits a point again where, similar dynamics take place, and your psychological nature responds to that moment as if it was remembering that place over there. So Chiron points to the healing of pre-existing patterns of integration or memory fields. And that's what it really means to go through the Chiron stuff. You're triggered in the moment, you're experiencing in the moment, but knowing that the origins of it lay deeper in something deeper. Okay. So the natal chart as a memory field, very profound. And that's basically how I see charts, and that's what I want to bring through in astrology. So Uranus and speaks to the process of individuation, right? So Carl Jung describes as the movement of individuation, that is the process by which a person becomes fully the individual that they can be. And again, this process is very different because it's not an individuation and saying, okay, I like blue shoes and you like red shoes, and so I identify myself as, different. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this picture that suggests an actual growing out and away from the mainstream beliefs and cultural norms and shapings that you identify with through a sense of security that is, in a sense, held together by a collective ideology. It is beginning to explore what the archetypal story represents to you and what is held within that. And of course, that process in itself means striking out into the abyss and being completely different. But when you do that, just as Chiron suggests when he shoots the arrow through the bird's heart and he sacrifices himself, he gets placed in the pantheon of the 12 archetypes in the Sagittarius constellation as a hero. And so we can be seen as a hero with our Chiron story. But again, it's not that simple. It's very, very, it takes time, it takes cultivation, it takes deep commitment, it takes honesty, it takes a role that in a sense becomes your life. Really, it's a dedication, it's a commitment to it, it's a meditation that, it's all about it. So the path from Saturn to Uranus, i.e. Chiron's movement from Saturn to Uranus. Yeah, Rumi's quotes, I love this so much. The moment you accept what troubles you've been given, the door will open. This is the first wound. This is the first wound. Okay? The moment you accept what troubles you've been given, the doors will open. You notice the threshold here? The doors will open. You notice the acceptance of the initial wound, the rejection that holds within you, the acceptance of that. And that acceptance in itself can be a 5-year process. It can be 6 months. It can be, you go through that grief. You emotionally process that. The acceptance is not oh yeah, I accept that. It's not that simple. But ironically, when you go through that acceptance process, you actually surrender into a deeper sort of acceptance of your own incarnation. And in that place, you can begin to really, really do this. It's your road and yours alone. The path from Saturn to Uranus, the acceptance in Saturn, and as you go into the individuation process, it leads to something different. Others may walk it with you, thinking Chiron's nodal axis with Libra, integration, people sharing stories with you, suggestions, etc. But no one can walk it for you. And again, it just highlights that nobody could tell Chiron in his second wounding that he couldn't feel sorry for himself in that sense. He was wounded by it. The pain was in agony. He had to go, okay, please, I'll sacrifice myself. I accept this. I sacrifice myself. And in that state, we can actually begin to be brave enough to explore what is there. It's very profound. It's very profound. So the healing journey of Chiron, I think that everybody should, on some level, really, really, really pay attention to this over here as a process of self-acceptance. One of my favorite healers at the moment, Chiron healers at the moment, I really, really appreciate this person's work in many ways because it's so grounded, it's so practical, it's so real, it's so authentic. So growth often looks like a series of regressions into old patterns. Look at the tree when you're reading this, okay? Look at when I'm talking about individuation process. That tree is in its most beautiful glory, completely content with the randomness of its branching out, of its individuation. It's not questioning its nature. It doesn't reject it in that way. It fully embraces its weird and wackiness for itself. And in that sense, it becomes beautiful to observe because of its naturalness. Okay. Growth often looks like a series of regressions into old patterns and progressions into new skills and self-discoveries. Think about the series of regressions into old patterns. These patterns are eroded into the rejection, the initial wound. But as we kind of accept that part of ourselves and we go into our deeper process, we learn new skills and discoveries about ourselves in that process. So it's normal to have periods of time when we don't feel strong, capable, resourceful, or resilient. Growth is not going to be a process of, going from point A to point B, this is how it is. It's struggling. I know for a fact that this Chiron thing that came into incarnation today was not bliss in the way that you think it is. Like we're doing this over here, but just in terms of like putting this work together and realizing patterns and needing to confront certain things. And it was a it was a beautiful teaching to bring this thing together, but it was sobering. Okay, and sometimes we don't feel strong and capable and resourceful or resilient to process this, and that's sometimes the part of recognizing the threshold, the emphasis on the threshold. And this is from Dr. Ariella Swartz. I highly encourage you to go check out her work, by the way. Okay, so I'm getting towards the end of my slides over here, just so that so I just want to point more to manifestations of this, and this is just one of three. So in the Chiron video course, there are 4 videos: Chiron's incarnation, the astrological meaning, and astronomy meaning and myth. The second one talks about Saturn and Uranus, and the third one is how to heal with Chiron. So it's like my practical suggestions of how, as an astrologer, or how you would work with it, types of attitudes you would have, where to go, etc. So this over here is kind of what the third video is all about. The fourth video is me doing a Chiron through the houses. So I go through Chiron through all the houses so that you can actually begin to synthesize these things together for yourself. So this is just a snippet of how we can see Chiron within our lives. Okay, so the siege of Sarajevo. What I like about this so much, this example, is that, remember when I said to you right in the beginning, I said that Chiron was at the there's the aphelion and the perihelion. So when Chiron was discovered in 1977, Chiron was closest to Uranus, so it was orbiting the nature of Uranus, which suggests to us something. And then what did I want to say to you? And then when we're dealing with this over here with the siege of Sarajevo and other things that were happening during this time, Chiron was actually closest to Saturn. Okay, and that's why I said you'd be immensely surprised at how graphic and real it gets when these archetypal energies hit certain points within our cosmic clock, but also how the Chiron showed up very apparently and how it actually revealed to us about our own collective story. Okay, so the first thing is Saturn and Chiron were actually, so Chiron and Saturn make a conjunction in 1965-66 in Pisces, okay? And then Chiron gets discovered in 1977. And then from 1988 up until 1993, actually it's 1993 and a little bit further on, Chiron opposes Saturn, okay? So Chiron opposes Saturn. So here we have this siege of Sarajevo. And actually I wanted to point out in the course, I actually show you the Berlin Wall, because that was just fascinating. The nature of the Berlin Wall when Saturn was opposed Chiron. I just want you to think of the nature of Saturn, wall, Chiron, opposition, Berlin Wall, freedom. Okay. So here we have this thing again. So Saturn opposes Chiron between 1988 and 1993, right? And so the Bosnian War was an international armed conflict that took place in Bosnia and Herzegovina, having started in the 6th of April 1992, and the war ended on the 14th of December 1995, right? So does that image over there illustrate to you balance, equality, and integration of collective ideals? And does that image give you any feeling within inside of yourself of where humanity finds inclusion in itself, thinking Chiron's nodal axis? Right, we know that the answer is no. That image looks like destruction. It is war, okay? So Bosnian War, the international armed conflict. Remember Saturn, remember wound, remember separation, remember division, remember the fortress that I showed you earlier, the threshold. And here what we have is Chiron suggesting and pointing to us the deeper psychological and emotional rift that takes place within our collective and individual psyche regarding our differences and the inability to interact and find common interaction as a human race through this kind of like division consciousness. Now remember, this is 1995, 1992, and at some point I'll do a video where I talk about the correlation between things like how the energy in the time of Marx when he was alive and how that is actually culminating itself in 1992, 1993, 1994 and Uranus-Neptune conjunction. It was huge, but I'm not there yet at the moment. But this is giving a glimpse of the suggestion that what we are dealing now in 2019, okay, that we're trying to resolve in this divide, this rift, okay, that we're trying to heal through, was brought to us when Saturn was making, when Chiron was at the closest point to the Sun during this period of time, when Saturn and Chiron were in opposition to each other. Chiron was in the orbit of Saturn, and so it was bringing the wound into our physical reality for us to see. Okay, and so naturally through that wounding, we got to see the devastation. We got to see what was there in beneath the surface. Now, to the collective, to consensus people, it's just like, oh, that's just war. It's uncomfortable. It's horrible. Blah 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 blah. But like I said in Rumi's quote, everything that is seen on the surface has its origins in the unseen. That's not what he said specifically. I'm quoting it, but that's what he's talking about. Everything in reality has, or in the unseen, is rooted in the origins, i.e. that this is a manifestation of an energetic field that we hold within ourselves. And why I'm bringing this specifically, because of the opposition with Saturn and Chiron, and when Chiron was closest here, right? So the siege of Sarajevo is this war, this conflict, this armed forces where there's just destruction, and it's revealing to us the Saturn process, okay? 6th of April, 14th of December, 3 years, and Saturn's opposing Chiron all the time. Check this out, guys. So this happens on the 5th of September 2018. That war that took place in 1990, when was it? Sorry, I just forgot temporarily. 1992 to 1995. These people that are here are war veterans that are again in conflict with the state or in against resistance, and they're holding protests, okay, for months, demanding payment, like higher payment for the benefits of unemployment, okay? These are war veterans. Now, I want to show you something here. The 5th of September 2018, when I looked at the transits of where the nodes were when this took place, and when the nodes were when the war was taking place, where was the nodal axis? Where was the moon south node and north node last year in September? Okay, anybody in the chat, just as an example, or you can reflect on it. Where were the nodes, the lunar nodes? What signs? Okay, they were actually in Aquarius and Leo. The south node was in Aquarius, the north node was in Leo. So this over here, the nodes were hitting the exact point. Remember that image of the Fibonacci sequence, or the phi, where I was talking about the Uranus as a memory field? So here are these nodes transiting the exact point when that war was taking place, and what it awakens within these people who are embodying the energetic field of those memories are in conflict again, and it's arising the unresolved material that is repressed during that time. It came back to the surface to be healed. It blew my mind. It was unbelievable. I was like, am I really actually seeing this? It was so amazing to see this, like this validation of this deep, intense like process. And of course, Saturn, Chiron were in Aquarius, and Saturn opposed Chiron, so Leo axis again. So in 1995, when this war had taken place, right, the nodes of the moon moved over the nodes of Chiron. So the nodes of the moon, okay, in 1995, the nodes of the moon moved over the nodes of Chiron. They were 27 degrees north node and 27 degrees south node, okay? So the north node was exactly conjunct Chiron's north node in 1995 when this conflict ended, okay? And Jupiter was in the south node of Uranus. Okay, we're talking about this is an international conflict, and it suggests that this is like Chiron revealing to us through the division of our beliefs and our cultural norms and our ideologies how it creates separation. And Chiron suggesting to us that this is the root of our separation, is our and also it reveals to us the need to confront certain beliefs that we hold that suggest to us, hey, by the way, my God's better than yours, as an example, okay? So these symbols were suggesting to us that the healing is coming from the division, from the wounds that took place then in this original war. And this was a conflict that was taking place. But here's something else that I also want to show you, right? Because Saturn was at the perihelion, Chiron was at the perihelion, closest to the sun in Saturn's orbit, it was revealing to us where this pain and suffering exists. In September 2018, Chiron is closer to Uranus's orbit, and it's pointing to how the unconscious comes to the surface. But look at the war conflict again. This is not a sort of a debate where it's like, okay, we'll help you out here. This is an actual conflict. So the memory resurfaces in a gay where it replays it out again. It's like the wounding's there. It's the Saturn interfacing with the repressed archetype again, Uranus archetype. Yeah, just amazing. So in 2018, there was no actual records of how many former soldiers were eligible for benefits. Okay, so after many after many of them falsely declared themselves as being veterans, there were protesters that wanted to sort through and kind of understand and purge the unregistered people that were getting benefits from this. So this was also part of this kind of protest, right? They were trying to reveal where this chaos was of people taking advantage of these things as well. Chiron was actually in Virgo. Chiron in Virgo. I've written down some notes over here. Chiron in Virgo. All right. So Chiron was in Virgo at the end of this war in 1995, and Chiron was in Pisces in 2018. So literally, when the war ends, Chiron's in Virgo, and as it hits its opposition in a Pisces, this event also takes place. And again, we're looking at the non-memory field over here. It's just crazy. And essentially, we're dealing with this. The walls come down, and when the walls come down, i.e., that we break the threshold, what arises is the pain, and that's what you're seeing there. The liberation comes out of it, but we have to deal with what is existing under that repression as well. Okay. So Chiron and our own healing journey, right? Our solar system and the healing journey. You can see Pluto's orbit. It's deep, it's very profound, it's very unconscious in its process. And Neptune is also sitting out there. And I'm just pointing to the astronomy over here to reveal to you that when you're dealing with our inner planets, this is our personality. You know, and Saturn is the boundary. It's the threshold of our ego structure, and then it's interfacing with the outer planets and their orbits, which are very profound and deep and complex. So the healing journey takes place from Saturn, which is the personal ego and the body, to the more deeper dynamics that are essentially sitting here. Okay. So again, another imagery to suggest to you of how this is actually taking place, right? So yeah, you have Neptune, the collective unconscious. You've got Pluto, which represents this deep, emotional imprinting and the frozen parts of ourselves. This is the part of us that we will generally, when we have to face that part of us, it's something that when we interact with, it's going to be, we have to have that honesty, right? As I was sharing with you earlier. So let me just undo the laser point over here. Let me show you something quickly. So this is this is my natal chart, and there was a specific reason why I put these transits on. Oh yeah, this was the transits of when that event took place. Okay, the siege of Sarajevo, and she has Chiron in Virgo at the time. Okay, just over there, but in Virgo. But I'm not pointing to my chart specifically. It was just that I put the transits over there so we could see it. Now these transits will reflect points in our astrology chart. Okay, so Chiron will come along and says Chiron's process of healing is located firmly in the far out realms beyond. Okay, right, so the far out realms here beneath the surface here. Okay, can you see on the screen there, which preside over by Pluto, the lord of transformation, going beneath the surface. Okay, the threshold being there. There's the threshold. Okay, here's your conscious self, the personality, your inner planets, and then here's the deeper unconscious process. So the movement of energy that accompanies true healing is indeed from the deep unknown, and it cannot be forced or faked, although we can work to create conditions that invite it into our souls. So again, working with the Chiron thing is like, okay, I've got this energy over here, I'm going to do this. It's not a mental process. You actually have to go through this idea of really, supporting this healing dynamic. So there's Chiron on the screen, as you can see it over there. It sits in the memory field of Uranus, the substrata of our subconscious, and it moves to the surface, and that's when we'll have a Chiron transit, like Chiron square or a Chiron opposition, But again, it's time sensitive. So it's not just going to be randomly coming up. It will be coming up through transits that will bring memories to the surface, but that those memories themselves can reflect a process of what exists at a deeper level. So that's what I was pointing out with the solar system. It's like when the memory field of a Chiron event comes in, it doesn't necessarily have to speak to that moment. It can speak to an origin that's held deeper within the process of Pluto, that lord of the underworld. So yeah, there's another example. There's a Pluto, Chiron sitting on the Pluto. This is where you would look to say, okay, I've got Chiron conjunct Pluto, I've got Chiron square Pluto, I've got Chiron conjunct my nodes, Chiron square my nodes, and so on and so forth. And it comes straight to the surface. And these experiences can be pretty intense. Okay. So having the right attitude. This is where we need to take the leap and willing to cut the umbilical cord that keeps us safe and attached to our nest. Remember talking about the guardians of the threshold. Beyond the threshold, guardian is uncharted territory. Okay? And the hero must show that he is prepared to lose sight of his homeland and venture into the unknown. That's the attitude, right? This is the hero's journey from Campbell. Okay, so some of the kind of healing modalities that then take place with this, holotropic breathwork as an example. So a powerful approach to self-exploration, south node in Chiron, and personal empowerment, north node in Chiron, that relies on our innate wisdom or inner wisdom and its capacity to move through the positive transformation and wholeness, right? Healing ancestral karma. Okay? So it's just kind of the modalities that you would use with Chiron in this sense. So the experiences occur and the transformation happens not only in a biological dimension, or Saturn, our life, okay, but our history from birth up until the present moment. So again, revealing to us this, the birth chart representing this point of origin and then opening us up to the deeper layers. But they also encompass what Stan Grof calls the prenatal and transpersonal dimensions of the psyche. And so this is this kind of realization and awakening into that Chiron can also, the wound in Chiron can also stem from the 9 months in the womb and what your mom carries and what her mom carries and so on and so forth. So investigate holotropic breathwork as a deeply profound healing modality for understanding Chiron work, because again, it's going transpersonal. See, Chiron is going beneath the surface. It's going beyond the threshold. It's exploring something that is your own process that only you can find. Okay. Dream work for Jung, for instance, so working with the Jungian analyst as an example. Jung held that dreams are challenges to the assumptions and the complacency of the ego. Compensations for one-sided conscious attitudes. Remember talking about the idea of holding on to something and saying, I need to let go of this in order to explore it. Or messages from the unconscious that prompt us to question the value and the direction of our current modes of thinking, feeling, and living. Very profound in the sense of exploring dream work as another way to access the primordial Uranian subtle energies and the deeper self of Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune, and what they represent for us, and the deep self. So the dreams show the inner truth and reality of the patient as it really is, not as a conjuncture, not as I conjure it to be, and not as he or she would like it to be, but as it is. Very confronting. Okay. So another process that I'm finding it really, really interesting as well is a thing called EMDR therapy. There's a lot of information out there that says that it's not really that, it's a pseudoscience. I'm yet to kind of like really go in deep into it, but it is something that I see a lot of what I consider to be certain healers that are of a quote unquote normal healing modality, but needs to be defined as alternative because it's not a patriarchal man-made healing complex, but it is essentially a holistic way to understand the nature of memory within our psyche, because remember we're talking about memory here. So eye movement and decentralization and processing. Eye movement, decentralization and reprocessing, EMDR therapy. So essentially comprehensive approach to therapy that integrates the elements of psychodynamic, cognitive, behavioral, interpersonal experience, and body-centered therapies to maximize treatment effects. So we're dealing with the body, we're acknowledging that field, we're acknowledging what has occurred to us, and all of these types of things. Amazing processes. So once you know somebody's tried to identify the visual memory in this person's memory field, they can begin to then break down the negative belief about the self and related emotions and the body sensations so that they can actually restructure how those experiences came into being. Okay. So this is a chart from somebody that was very, very kind enough to not only go through their Chiron process, but share with me a little bit about their Chiron work. This person's chart is a deeper analysis in the 4-part video series, as well as another chart. So I go through two charts and I show you how to apply what I've taught you here. So it's a very practical approach to the Chiron. But I just want to show you something. I've highlighted something in this person's charts and I want to tell you what they've shared with me. I realized I never really loved before. I thought I fell in love with whom adored me and made me feel high on that devotion. Can you see the Neptune Scorpio process here of the moon as it correlates to that there? Can you see that process as it connects to the Chiron? I realized I never really loved before, right? I thought I fell in love with whom I adore, or with whom adored me and made me feel high on that devotion, creating a codependency on the addictive feeling. Can you see that stuff over there? Okay. Or other times, I thought I loved the ones I needed to take care of because I learned to take care of me through taking care of other people first. Bottom line, I fell in love with myself and to take care of it, and that is pure love, true, clear love, full of devotion. I just want to show you that this is the type of material that, from what I understand of the person, came to realize during their Chiron return. And these were incredibly profound symbolic representations of how this showed up in this person's life. Okay, you can see the codependency with Uranus in the 7th house over here, trying to break the crisis in that dynamic. Can you see Chiron Saturn opposition here again, and then that devotion, like this, there's Chiron in the second house in Pisces. Chiron is ruled by Neptune because Neptune is the planetary ruler of Pisces. So it's influenced by that. And this person's self-image came here to be transformed. And these were the thoughts, these were the realizations that materialized the healing journey to wholeness that came into existence here. So another thing that I wanted to point out was here, the person writes, I let go of any control issues that only reveal a fear in intimate relationships when sharing space, ideas, and resources. A fear of intimacy is the Pluto 8th house dynamic. Okay, this is opposed Saturn, the threshold that keeps me in place. I let go of any control issues that only reveal a fear in intimate relationships when sharing 8th house, ideas, space, resources, second house, ideas, Uranus. The liberation came from breaking down the pre-existing core attachments. The psychological enmeshment is held within Pluto. And the fear is associated with losing oneself in that process, or finding where are the boundaries within relationships, oscillating between these two states of ecstasy and then, So this is what they write as well. The fear stems from past feelings of betraying myself in relationships to intimate relationships, where sharing was the main component. Okay, listen to this. The fear that stems from past feelings of betraying myself in relationships or relationship to intimate relationships where sharing was the main component. Again, I'm highlighting over here these symbols. This is what the soul is actually sharing in their Chiron return. Okay, this is created because I'm working on establishing a difference of individual boundaries and becoming an emotional authority and not forcing this authority on others with fake hierarchical positions. Neptune, 10th house, conjunct the moon in Scorpio, right? You can see here that with Saturn opposed Pluto, it can be easy for the soul in prior lifetimes to have been very needed to hold relationships in place through a kind of control dynamic, but then also have been controlled themselves in the past. So part of their healing and deconditioning cycle, in other words, to individuate from these pre-existing dynamics in their life, was to realize the balance between how their own boundaries needed to be established first in order to be able to create healthy, respectful boundaries for other people. And these are very just simple things that I'm sharing here, but it's so deep. But this is what I mean about individuation. This is something that's unique to this person. It cannot be shared with another. The wisdom in this is the sharing. Right? That when this person comes across other people that they talk about. Okay? So I ended off by saying, and not forcing this authority on others with fake hierarchical positions that have become obsolete and harmful to my existence. For when they happen, I create chaos, Pisces, and isolation. Okay? Again, Aquarius rising, Saturn in Pisces over here. Isolation, disassociated from it, disconnected. Okay, harmful to my existence. For when they happen, I create chaos and isolation and lots of confusion, Neptune, and I also cause deep emotional harm. This is the honesty that is required with the Pluto, with the Chiron work as well. It's like you actually confront these things so deeply within yourself that that's what you have to give up about yourself. The idea that this is who you are, and it's not. You have to really go through things and you will be confused in your process. Two more things here that I want to put across and then I'm done. The body of water expresses a yielding to a new way of exploring my feelings, a softer way of directing the energy instead of impositions. I felt all this, impositions I felt. All this by being challenged. So this person being challenged, and their need in their challengement to put boundaries in place, to protection mechanisms, to put the threshold, their defenses. So they're saying that the water, Neptune conjunct the moon, this Pisces energy was to dissolve these very rigid boundaries that they might have had, energetic impositions. So, and feeling impositions that were inflexible and authoritarian and somehow ridiculous, only to reveal that it was what I have been asking others in the past. I mean, for those of you that follow this astrology in that sense, I don't need to kind of I'm just pointing to Look at these symbols and how they're playing out in this person's chart completely. This is Chiron here. The liberation, Uranus, from the nature of their pre-existing ways in which they would relate, and that the Virgo process correlates to the crisis dynamic here. And then pointing to something that needs to be surrendered about themselves. This confronting notion revealed that in truth, I have no real power when I impose based on hierarchy and not based on connectivity. The last floppy disk, the last floppy disk full of hurt and pain I had somewhere hiding came to the surface and broke attention and revealed my deepest fears of intimacy and why I'm so controlling, a mix of ancestral ways and by ways of wounds. So yeah, there are a lot of wounds that would be carried with that Pluto dynamic, and you can see how it's in opposition. You know, Uranus opposed Saturn, Pluto also here on the Chiron. This Chiron was pointing to the liberation between this very, very intense opposition between one's own personal authority and the opposition, and how to create, how to protect and defend themselves, and yet how that was separating themselves. Okay, so I go deeper into this process with this video course. Like I said, there's 2 charts over there, and yeah, and then again, Chiron through the houses. So thank you so much for the opportunity to give me this space. I hope that you found incredible value in this. I had just like an amazing time sharing it with you. Again, I would like to thank my partner Jen for not only supporting this process, but also giving the space to be able to create it in the state that everything was in. It is definitely, this is not a one-man show. And so when you do say thank you, please just want to remind you that it was a joint process. And even though she's not here, she was incredibly supportive in this process to bring this together for everybody, and also to put it before the course as well. So thanks very much, everyone. In this live stream, in the links, in the comments and in the description, you'll find the link to go and purchase the pre-order for the video course, if that is something that you feel called to do right now. I'm going to post in the chat over here a link to go check out the workshop that's available. I'll do this right now. Yeah, so like we'd say, just thanks very much. So I'm just gonna, there it is there. I'm just gonna post that in the chat. And so for any of you that, like I said, would like to, at some point in time when it's available to yourself, there is the actual course itself. You can go ahead and do a pre-order for that. But we sincerely hope that you found a lot of value in this. This was definitely something that I loved doing so much, and I really hope that, yeah, like I said, you got loads of value. So I'm going to just move the chat box closer. Yeah, and for those of you that, of course, were participating in this through the chat, I can see on YouTube, you know, watch this video over and over and over again. It's intended to be as an offering to really help you find a way to transform through this this way to access Chiron and its potential in very profound ways. So yeah. If there's anybody that has you know, 1 or 2 questions that they would like to ask me, I won't be able to answer questions like, my Chiron sits in the 5th house, what does that mean? But if there's anything that you want to share, that you want a little bit of clarification on, or anything that you feel important, you know, I'd be happy to kind of speak to that as well. So thanks very much to everybody that is participating in this. And don't forget to also like to let you know that we have a Patreon sort of platform where we share a lot of our work in that sense. We're kind of with Uranus and Taurus at the moment, reconstructing everything. So we're finding a different groove at the moment. But I highly encourage you to come check out our Patreon. As I said, we post stuff there, and we just released a full moon video that's also available on our site. For anybody that is living in Europe at the time, at this point in time, or if you feel like you are encouraged to travel from the States, there is a retreat happening on the 12th. Jen, please tell me if this is different. On the 12th of May, a one-day retreat with Jen. She's holding a retreat called Turning Point with two other ladies, where they do tea ceremonies, and they talk about human design and astrology, and I think they'll be doing some readings as well. So if you are able to, if you're in Sweden or in Europe and you would like to participate in the Turning Point retreat that's happening on the 12th of May in Stockholm, we actually have a link to that. I want to get a link to that so I can share it with you for any of you that are watching it. 11th of May. So the 11th of May is when Turning Point is taking place. I encourage you, like if you have if you're in Europe and you feel like you want to do that, I know that there will be more throughout the year, I'm sure, to go look at that. I'm just going to get the link to where that is. I see somebody asked me a question, so I'm going to do that at the same time as well. Let me just get this link, just post it there. So myself and Jen do readings. If you're into human design, if you know about human design, we also both do readings ourselves. Jen has got a very good knowledge of human design. So if you're into human design, or if you want to learn about human design, that is also a beautiful Chiron exploration, by the way, as well. I encourage you to, when you have the time and space, to book a reading with us as well on that. Okay. Okay, I'm just busy looking for the Turning Point thing. Oops. There we go. Okay. You might actually, why can't I, there it is. Okay. Yay. Nope. There we go. Okay, I found it. Okay, so Turning Point link. Go check that out. There's a lot we can learn in over there. Okay. So somebody asked me a question about how do you feel your Chiron Gemini has manifested in your life, Simon? Well, firstly, I have Mercury conjunct Pluto in my chart, and it's in the 10th house. And then my Chiron is actually in conjuncting my Pluto Mercury. And so Gemini Mercury Chiron is in Gemini. So Mercury is the planetary ruler of my Chiron. It's conjunct Pluto. I also have the Sun conjunct Pluto as well, which is where my Chiron is in the 5th house. And there are two ways that I've seen it show up. One, a very internalized wound around the parents' opinion about myself. So almost like a rejection that it's my fault kind of thing. So that kind of plays out very subtly within my substructure as response mechanisms. Like it's always my fault. I've done something wrong. I need to be blamed for it, as an example. So the language or the words, I'm very sensitive to what types of words are used. And so it can be very difficult to discern between what types of the context of the word or how the word is expressed. So it's kind of an innate rejection of my own mind and language. And then it kind of manifests sometimes as a rejection of another person's language as well. So it's in that way it plays out. And then of course, yeah, so that's one of the definitely the ways that I've seen it play out very profoundly, that healing, that internal rejection. I kind of have to break through it in that way. So let's just see if there's another question that's over there. Happy to kind of respond to that. Okay. Alexandria, you say, how do you access your tears about the harshness towards you from your parents? It's a very, 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 very difficult thing. It's very difficult, actually. I don't. It has to come through an active exploration. It's like a memory type of dynamic. I have to remind. I have to go into memories where there is. It's like, I don't know, I have to access the sadness in some way, which because of a lot of my stuff being in Capricorn is very shut down. So I suspect that once I start to do some EMDR therapy and probably some holotropic breath work, I'll probably be able to access a lot of the grief or the sadness that is held within that dynamic. At the moment, it's very, I feel like it's like shallow. I feel like the access or the depth of the pain that I've been able to access in that thing is very shallow. And then sometimes I can access it through my children. Like for instance, if I'm watching my children interact with each other, I can feel the sensitivity of that harshness, and then that pain can sit with me. But then when I incarnate it into myself, sometimes it becomes too much, and I actually have to shut it down. I have to stop doing it. I have to put the defense mechanisms back in place, because when you incarnate Chiron into your life, you immediately will become sensitive at the nature of the sensitivity of Chiron. And so you see it all around you, you feel it all around you. And if you haven't prepared for that experience, it can be very traumatic. So for me, I kind of navigate into them for very short periods of time, and then I navigate out of it. So the most recent current thing that I just went through was the reshuffling of emotion, the displaced motions around my step parents, my stepmother, and and like how I internalized her, and how that was related to my own internalizing of my childhood. I actually went through a process where I was listening to Hillman. I can't remember if it's not James Hillman, something Hillman, a psychotherapist. Maybe if somebody's on the chat that were able to bring up his first name. But anyway, Hillman, he has this video on YouTube that's called "Abandoning Your your youthful self." It's not called youthful self. I'll find it. It's like you have to abandon your child, not your inner child, but you have to abandon the childlike state that you grow out of. And this process of going from your child to maturity, you have to abandon the internal fantasies and ideologies and internalized. I think it is James Hillman. I don't know. I have to. I'm going to go into YouTube quickly and just kind of like find it. Give me a second. Anyway, the point was is that I came into contact with this video, and he talks about abandoning the inner child. Yeah, it is James Hillman. Yes, there we go. Yes, and here James Hillman, and abandoning something. Yeah, abandoning the child. It's actually very, very confronting because I'll actually link it to you. Let me just press the button, and I'll share it with you in the chat, wherever it is. There we go. So James Hillman in this video will help you begin to break away from the internalized child and its relationship to the parents, where there weren't any boundaries of self-understanding, because it's a very vital part in beginning to reshape your inner relationship to how you internalize your parents and what that role plays in as you get older, you actually have to abandon that part of yourself, because it no longer supports. It's like your adolescence, basically. Because you internalize reality through the same way that your child internalizes reality, which is very much through. So you can have certain pre-existing ideas about, your views or your feelings towards a parent at a young age, but that's rooted in something that's from a child's perspective, which is always going to be very much focused on how that wounded them. So even a kind of an experience of victimization can be held within that childlike state, because it's very much how it happened to you. This is where kind of another aspect of Saturn's wound, or the wounding of Chiron, reveals itself in Saturn as well. Okay. So in abandoning that, I was able to then reshuffle the emotional relationship I had to my stepmom, which then allowed me to actually heal the disconnect that was between myself and her in myself. And that in itself kind of created and established a new way of relating that was really different. And in that way, it really reunited a deeper part of the layer of shame or internalized guilt that I had experienced growing up, as an example. So, okay. So I think that this is where I'm going to end today's stream, everybody. So I'm going to. Well, I've posted in the chats that link to James Tillman's work about manning the child, what I spoke about. Don't forget to check out the Chiron video course. Like I said, it is a course designed to give you a bunch of tools to use that when you navigate and work through your own Chiron, it's supportive, but it also gives you the opportunity that if you want to teach Chiron to other people and you're an astrologer, it's geared towards that as well. Okay. And that link is also on our website, or not. The link is not on our website. The link is in the chat. You can see I'm getting really tired right now. I've posted a again over there. If you're in Europe and you have, you want to come to a retreat that is hosted by Jen and two of her work colleagues, I encourage you to do that. The link is also in the chat box. We'll post it in the comments and the description. But for everybody, thank you so much for the space time. I know that you, from what I can see on the chat, love this so much. Thanks to everything that put this together. I hope that you have a wonderful Easter experience, and we'll see you in another stream. Okay, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.